Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
It just can't be. Vanessa thought to herself, holding the photograph she had just pulled out of the album she had found on the farthest shelf. How is this even possible? Thoughts in her head flashed one after another, but as she tried to put them in a single logical chain, she could not. She sat down in the chair where just yesterday James was sorting out important documents. And today both it and this office were waiting for the arrival of the Hares. Vanessa began to replay her childhood. Not the most pleasant images flashed through her mind, as if it were just yesterday. She thought to herself. Vanessa did not remember her mother. She had only seen her in pictures and kept imagining what she was really like. Every now and then the woman's face would appear in her mind. But it was still very difficult to imagine her mother in real life. But Aunt Kelly's sympathetic lamentations were forever etched in the girl's memory. When Nancy had passed away, poor girl, every now and then the aunt would say, when things went wrong in Vanessa's life, she's an orphan. She's been an orphan almost since she was born. Would you take pity on her rather than scold her? A child needs support. She doesn't need your reprimand. Auntie's tears always worked, which allowed Vera to behave as she pleased at school. The girl always did what she wanted to do, and if she didn't like it, she showed her difficult character. Kelly, but what did you teach the child to do? Adriana lamented, looking through her diary for the next quarter. Who will she be later with such grades will go to sweep the streets. She doesn't study at all. That in this one for the last 6 months, she has not brought a single positive grade. And it's only 7th grade. There's so many years of school ahead of her. What's the point? She's never going to get into anything with this diploma. And we can't afford to pay her tuition. Mom, stay out of parenting. Kelly waved me off. I've already taken in a child out of the goodness of my heart. Your Vanessa would be living in an orphanage right now. A father who'd started a new family and forgotten all about his daughter. A mother who's been dead for years. I'm raising her the best I can. It's hard for me to, by the way. It was your initiative for me to get custody of Vanessa. I didn't ask to be her mother. Relationships in the family were complicated. Kelly practically kept Adriana out of Vanessa's upbringing. She was convinced that the child should have one authority figure. Vanessa pretended to obey her aunt in everything, but she did everything in her own way. Adriana could not even make the stubborn girl do her homework. In high school, Vanessa had no time to come home, but immediately went out with friends. No matter how hard her grandmother tried to teach her reason, it was no use. Aunt Kelly let me wave the girl away. Every time her grandmother reprimanded her or started moralizing, she said, I'm old enough to do what I see fit. Get your high school diploma first, grown up. You're ours, Adriana exclaimed. Get a job when you can feed yourself, then you'll be an adult. Until then, that's just the way it is. Little dependence. Vanessa wasn't planning on continuing her studies after high school. And as soon as there was talk of her future, she told her aunt openly. I don't see the point, the girl muttered. My grades are lousy. But even if you pull yourself up and the last 2 years before graduation to study normally, still in my position, it is unpromising. I'll just sit around for 5 years with no money. And who will be better from this? You can't find a normal job right after college anyway. The first time we'll have to work for a pittance, and our family is already poor. I'm not going to waste my youth for some diploma that won't pay for itself later. Aunt Kelly didn't argue with the girl. As soon as Vanessa got her diploma, she started looking for a job. Where do you plan to get a job? Adriana asked Riley. Are you going to deliver newspapers or remove plates from tables? Grandma, stop being sarcastic. Vanessa waved away. I'll at least go to be a maid. Why? I'll find a rich house. I'll get a job there, and maybe I'll meet a handsome millionaire. Or a millionaire's son. Why not? It's a good salary. And I won't have to live under the same roof with you. I'll have my own room in a rich house. I work during the day and rest at night. It's just like people, except I don't have to travel to work. They always hire live-in maids so they can serve coffee and tea or something. The girl is out of her mind, exclaimed the woman. Who would take you in? To get into a house like this, do you need references? What have you got? You don't have anything. Just a high school diploma. And you're not smart enough. But you'll see, Grandma, I'll be working in a month. I'll find a job. Not everywhere, and not everyone needs old ladies with a bag of references who can't do anything but mop floors. All day long, Vanessa sat on the internet and looked through the ads. But she heard only refusals. At a certain point, the girl was desperate to find a suitable job and was ready to admit that her grandmother was right. But suddenly she got a call back from the girl she had talked to the day before and told her that she was ready to hire her. My dad is not old, but he is very seriously ill, Emily thought, meeting Vanessa in a large country house. The girl immediately invited the potential candidate to her father's house, not only to discuss with her all the nuances of the work, but also to show the room in which Faith will have to live. Duties are all standard care for Dad, if necessary. Sometimes he does everything himself. It doesn't come and go. It depends on how he's feeling. You'll need to clean the house every day. It's no big deal. We're all technically equipped, so if you just take out the equipment, turn on the buttons. And in a couple hours, the house is perfectly clean and, of course, walk our Duke. That's something my dad can't do for a long time. It's hard for him to spend a few hours with the dog on the street, and with Daddy should spend as much time as possible. He doesn't like to be alone, he gets bored. Read him books and movies together. Look, I don't have time. That's why I was looking for a housekeeper about my age, so that the father, so to speak, felt the daughter's care. That's it. No offense with the salary. My dad is the owner of a large construction company, so our family has enough money. You can start work tomorrow. When Vanessa heard the salary, she was pleasantly surprised. Not everyone with a higher education pays so much money. She thought to herself, and the same day as she signed the contract with Alina, she moved her things into a large, spacious room with luxury renovation, just like her mother. Adriana exclaimed. When did she find out where Vanessa would live? Mother, who loved luxury? Was she passionate about money? I was always trying to get ahead, trying to marry a rich man. I dreamed of a career in modeling. I kept dreaming that someday a handsome prince would appear on the horizon, who would serve her everything on a silver platter. But he never showed up. Look, behave yourself, or you'll not only get kicked out, but you'll ruin your reputation for life. Mom, enough with the admonishing. Kelly intervened. She's an adult. Let her do what she wants. She's leaving us, and that's fine. You should be happy, not in the spirit of his girls to judge. After Vanessa moved in, Adriana became nostalgic. Not a day went by that she didn't think of her eldest daughter and compare her granddaughter Kelly to her. But they look so much alike. The woman urged, they're the same in looks and personality. Remember how Nancy was always striving for a beautiful life? How she wanted to live differently from everyone else. Yes, sarcastically replied Kelly, who never got along well with her older sister. She and Nancy had always competed for the attention of her mother, who had always praised Nancy and Kelly as if she paid no attention at all. She didn't want to. She didn't have a mind. If she hadn't left Peter and hadn't fallen for the untold riches of some old goat, she might still be alive. It's not in her nature to mess with men like that. How can you talk about your own sister like that? Adriana was indignant. The woman had never understood why Kelly treated Nadia with such disdain. It seemed to her that there had never been, and could never be, any reason for disagreement between the sisters. On the contrary, they should always help each other. Adriana didn't even notice how differently she treated her daughters. And when Kelly had once dared to reproach her for loving Nancy, she had been much more offended and had not spoken to her for a week. Kelly, you can't do this. Nancy is no longer alive, and the dead are never spoken ill of. We have to honor her bright memory. That's one thing. And two, sing, and she'd never be happy. He couldn't give her what she wanted and really deserved, and he could never give it to her. Nancy had done him no wrong. She'd done honorable things to him. Of course she didn't. Of course she went off to the sea with a rich goat. That's very fair to her lawfully wedded husband. The fact that his mother had almost gone crazy pulling Peter out of the world was fair enough. Kelly remembered the events of the past years as clearly as if they had all happened yesterday, and to this day condemned her sister, who had ruined not only her life, but also the life of Peter, with whom Kelly had been in love since high school. In his youth, the young man had shown great promise. Peter always studied well, was the winner of all kinds of city competitions, and claimed admission to leading universities. Perspective, not love, attracted Nancy to him. "Well, you will be able to get a job in the 3rd year," she inadvertently asked the young man when he said he was planning to study to be a doctor. "I heard that this specialty is one of the most promising. Surgeons are now very much in demand and earn well. And you can also go to work at the institute." "Yes," answered Peter cheerfully. "I plan not even from the 3rd, but from the 2nd year to start practicing. The earlier, the better. Have you already decided where you are going to go?" "Yes, I'll probably go to some historical or philological studies," Nancy answered. "I'm good with humanities, but I'm not very good with technical sciences. Where will I go? For me, of course, study is important, but it's far from the most important thing." As soon as Peter got a job, they got married. Adriana was skeptical about her daughter's decision, and long before the wedding she urged her to think hard about whether she should marry Peter. "Nancy, I don't understand you," the woman said. "You never wanted to marry so young, and you were planning to find yourself a rich groom. Why did you suddenly decide to tie your life to Peter? He's just an ordinary guy. He's from a simple family just like you. You'll be kicking yourself later. A year later, or even sooner, you'll come crying to me that everything is wrong. Mommy, why are you really like a little girl?" Nancy was surprised to find a rich groom. Where to find him? "Peter at least has a promising brain, and I'll make a rich one out of him myself. Do you think if I marry him, I'll let him be a simple doctor all his life?" "No, I'll send him to private practice right away. There's nothing to do in hospitals, and private clinics pay well. Then he'll be able to open his own business. Hockey and his years. He'll become the owner of some multidisciplinary medical center. The main thing is he's not a fool. And the rest will come somehow. It's fresh. I find that hard to believe. Don't make a mistake, daughter. So you won't regret it later. You haven't even met his parents yet. Where will you live? With him, of course. Speaking of parents, in case you didn't know, Peter chose this specialty for a reason. He followed in the footsteps of his parents, and they have, by the way, a 5-room apartment in the center, and they live very well. So in time, he'll heal. You're like the moon, Mom, honestly. He was one of the richest kids in his class in high school. And we're a normal school, but we don't have poor kids. Most of them average. Peter's family is one of the few. Nancy, I told you what to do. Suit yourself. Your life is yours to live. I can only advise and guide. But I'm not going to interfere with anything." Watching the nurse prepare for the wedding, Kelly was very angry with the girl. It was a shame that Peter never paid attention to her, no matter how hard she tried to please him. Even in her school years, Kelly tried in every possible way to befriend the young man, but he always made it clear that he treated her solely as a younger sister, Nancy. "How are you going to get along with your mother-in-law?" "Sis," Kelly asked Riley. Nancy shook her mother all over her ears. Every day, all the girl talked about was what a beast Wendy was. She had realized it right after their first meeting when Peter had brought her into the house as his bride. "And I told you so," Adriana exclaimed. "His mother and I never knew each other intimately, but I remember her well from parent-teacher conferences. She could never keep her mouth shut. The teacher would give her a word, she'd give her 10. Good thing I didn't have much time to go to those meetings. And luckily, at your school, the teachers were focused on learning, not social gatherings. So it was very rare, but it was memorable. Nancy, it's not too late to call off the wedding. It's not a done deal. I told you we should meet the parents first. The father-in-law is no better," the girl muttered. "You should have seen the way that Alex looked at me. It seemed to me that he just nagged me with a look, Mom. But on the other hand, it's Peter who lives with me, not them. Who cares how they feel about me? We'll see each other a couple times a day for breakfast and dinner. I don't see a problem. Nancy, let them hear me. You're living under the same roof with them. You don't see the problem. When you start living together, you'll see it quickly." Adriana didn't know how to get through to her daughter. The woman felt as if Nancy was behind glass. All of her arguments she let pass the ears of realization. Common sense was eclipsed by the desire to move into a 5-room apartment and become the wife of a promising future surgeon. Everything else for Hope lost all meaning. And so it went on until the wedding. And when a week later Nancy moved into the apartment of Peter and his parents, everything changed a lot. It was as if the girl opened her eyes and realized with horror those moments that she had not noticed before. Mom is a nightmare, Nancy thought into the phone when she called her mother. Wendy's got me completely bored with cooking, washing, and cleaning. And most importantly, I can't even say a word to her, because she doesn't lie on the couch, but comes from work and does all this too. Peter and his father do nothing around the house. You can't even send them for groceries, if they even mention it. Immediately, they put on a sour face and wriggle as if I offered them to eat slop. Adriana cringed with hope, but there was nothing she could do to help her daughter. Kelly strongly disagreed with her mother and sister. "Mom, are you and Nancy acting like little kids?" she replied. When Adriana once again with sadness in her eyes told her about Nancy, that family life, who's supposed to do all this? What? Kelly, you're wrong. Nancy's in school too. And he's still a student, even though he's already working. They're equally tired. Why does she have to come home from school and get up to the stove? And he has to lie down on the sofa with his father and wait for Nancy to do everything. And if Wendy has taught them to live like that, they can live like that. What's Nancy got to do with it? After 6 months of living together, Nancy began to press her husband more and more, insisting that they had to move out and live apart from their parents. "I don't understand what's wrong with you." He was indignant. "The apartment is big. My parents treat you fine. I don't see a problem. If your mom asks you to do something, it's perfectly normal. You live in a family, not a dormitory. So you have to take care of the house just like the rest of the family. It's nothing special. It's just that I see you and your father taking care of the house." Muttered in response, "Nancy, unnecessary dust behind you, do not wipe the dust. And coming to a dirty bathroom, you generally have big eyes, as if only we should all constantly wash, clean, still washing, cooking. And your mom doesn't treat me well, and you know it yourself. Don't lie to yourself or to me, Peter. Both you and I understand everything perfectly well." The young man did not know that to answer his wife. His father and mother never had such disagreements. They had always lived amicably. Wendy was the perfect wife. It never occurred to her to try to put her father in charge of the stove or make him scrub the bathroom. She always did it all herself by default, and she always managed to get everything done at work too. So it was strange and surprising for Petit to hear from his wife that she was tired and didn't want to do anything around the house. "And I told you, son, modern girls are spoiled. All they want to do is marry rich, go on cruises, and do nothing." Wendy never missed an opportunity to tell her son what she thought of her daughter-in-law. Right up until the very last day before the wedding, she made every effort to dissuade Peter from getting married. But the son was adamant. Peter loved Nancy, loved long ago and very devotedly, since school, and was not ready to give up the joint family happiness with her. But the longer they lived together, the more often he noticed in the girl not the best qualities, which before the marriage did not pay attention. After a year of living together, Nancy was ready to divorce, but when she found out that she was pregnant, changed her mind, "Mom, yes, I didn't expect it myself," the girl said sadly. "I didn't think it would happen so fast. I thought we'd be with him for another year. 2. We'll live. I'll see what he'll do in terms of work. He's got some experience. I really hope he's smart enough not to take a job in some poor hospital." Peter reacted rather strangely to the news of his wife's pregnancy. It seemed to Hope that he was not so much pleased as frightened. "Something's wrong," she asked. "Aren't you glad we're having a baby?" "Yes, of course I am," he replied. "You're what?" "I'm very excited. It's just that when there are 3 of us, our lives are going to change, and we have to be ready for it." Nancy realized that this was a good opportunity to bring up again the issues that had been bothering her so much. And arguing with Peter about where and how they would live resumed. "Nancy, please listen to me," he said stiffly. "We don't have money for a rented apartment right now, and it's not certain that we will in the next few years. I'm still just starting my career. I need to gain experience, and then I can apply for a high-paying job. We'll save up for a down payment. We will take a mortgage, make repairs, move together with our child into a new apartment. But for now, we do not have such an opportunity, and I do not see the point in it. We have a nice big apartment, plenty of room for everyone. Are you going to do anything? How many years do you plan to work for experience? 3, 5, 10 years. How long did Nancy keep hitting on her husband? And every conversation about their future together ended in a scandal. When Vanessa was born, Nancy insisted that Adriana move in and help with the baby. I don't know how convenient that would be, Peter replied. When Nancy once again began to tell him how hard it was for her to take care of a newborn baby by herself. We should talk to the parents. It's their apartment after all. I can't decide for them. You can't decide anything, Nancy exclaimed angrily. By the way, I'm the one on sabbatical. I'm sitting here for my daughter, not you. I'm the one sacrificing my time and my career. Are you taking your lectures at work as usual? You've got a practicum coming up, and I'm stuck at home all day with the baby. My life has changed, but yours hasn't. All right, Peter. If you don't get Wendy to agree to let Mom move in with us, I'm packing up my stuff and moving in with Mom. She and my sister are going to help me with my daughter, and I'm coming to see you on the weekends, if that's relevant, because I think our relationship has gotten to the point where it's time to seriously consider divorce. When I married you, I expected a completely different life. I thought it would be completely different. But you don't want to make the effort to change things. You're happy with everything, and believe me, you'll be ready to live with your parents and gain valuable experience for another 20 years. But I'm not ready for that, and you don't want to understand that. Peter was very hurt to hear his wife's words. He had no idea that Nancy was so cynical and mercenary. She should have married a major with such an attitude. Wendy exclaimed, listening to his son's complaints about his family life. And she jumped out for a simple student and waiting for the Golden Mountains, as if she was born yesterday, and does not realize that just like that in our profession do not pay a lot of money. My father and I spent 10 years to live a normal life and raise you, and do not complain about it. See how spoiled you are. To tell you the truth, of all your classmates, I've always disliked her the most. There's something so rotten about your money, and I told you that right away. Immediately after the difficult conversation with Peter, Nancy called her mother, and she listened to her daughter and said yes. The music didn't play for long. Since it is so unbearable, drawing up a divorce, he still works, and any alimony you will pay. I'll take care of my daughter if you can't handle it. Kelly will help in any way she can, and you'll stop at the institute and get a job somewhere. You're as good as your husband. Now, by the looks of it, your ex-husband. Adriana knew how hard it was to raise a child alone. Nancy's father had passed away when she was only 10 years old. She remembered him well. Jack was a man who was kind, straightforward, open-minded, and very driven. He always worked hard and, as a real man should, gave all his money to his family. For several years of their life together, they were able to save enough money to buy a small apartment in a provincial suburb. There was also a village house, which after the death of his father, Adriana rented out. The woman was never able to return to work. Too much she was shaken by what happened to her husband. To find out the circumstances under which he left his life, it was not possible. A fight, drunken company, accident. The investigators never said anything concrete. To the poor woman, who for years had no place to go from despair, her daughters were the only thing keeping her afloat. They're the only thing she's lived for all these years. Oh, Nancy, if it weren't for you and Kelly, I don't know what I'd do. Adriana once said, on another anniversary, I'd probably be on the other side of the world by now if I didn't have to put you two on your feet. For a day, her mother always loved Kelly more, but she was afraid to admit it even to herself. It had worked itself out. Adriana saw her as her husband. Same facial features, same personality. Jack was a man with bala machine, calculating and very intelligent. If he flared up badly, he backed off almost immediately, apologized, made up, tried to make amends. He was never vindictive. Adriana loved him very much and from time to time wondered why fate had done such a cruel thing to her and found no answer. Look how much Vanessa looks like her father when she was a baby, Adriana said, looking at the little girl. Nancy only nodded in response. After moving to her mother's house, she was less and less interested in her daughter. Kelly and Adriana took turns taking care of the girl. Nancy was always missing. She rarely spoke to her mother and sister, so they knew very little about her life. Nancy, I realize you're not doing a good job taking care of your daughter, but you could spend some time with her at least once in a while. Adriana resented you. She is your daughter after all. Vanessa is still very young. She needs her mother. Yes, Mom, I understand. But I'm in the middle of a divorce. Nancy excused herself. I have to settle things with Peter. We have to decide how we are going to take care of our daughter's upbringing, which you keep telling me about. And we should also discuss material matters. I'll be spending all my time with my daughter. Nancy, why are you bullshitting me? What kind of divorce are you doing all day and all night? Sometimes you're not even home at night. Don't lie to me. I'm not a little girl. I see things and I know things. Since Nancy moved away from Peter, she has never met him or talked to him, even on the phone when he tried to contact her. She hasn't picked up her mother's phone. Nancy blatantly lied because she did not want to share with her that she had met the man she planned to commit her life to. Immediately after her divorce from her husband, Kelly suspected that her sister was lying. But the girl did not want to discuss this topic with her mother. Nancy and already became too much in their lives. And every day her sister and her problems annoyed her more and more. When did Nancy move in? Kelly sighed quietly. She was terribly jealous of her sister and Peter. But at the same time, she was glad that she no longer had to see Nancy every day. Her mother still discussed her problems, but it wasn't as often as when her sister lived with them. As soon as Nancy came back still and along with her young daughter, Kelly lost her peace again. She was again forced to spend all her time either caring for Vanessa or discussing the problems she found. Every day the girl became more and more irritable, and she had to make a great effort on herself to hide her true mood. That evening, Kelly was angry and cradling little Vanessa in her arms. She heard the doorbell ring suddenly. Looking through the peephole, the girl saw Peter. She was surprised to see him. "Why did you come?" she asked, opening the door. "There is no house for glasses." "I'm just on her soul," answered the young man. "Why doesn't your sister answer my calls or return my calls?" "What kind of strange behavior? You wouldn't happen to know, would you? She has already filed for divorce." Hearing the conversation between the young people in the corridor, Adriana came out, who did not understand what was happening. "Peter," she said, "don't you want to see your daughter?" "Not now. Vanessa's mom is asleep." Kelly intervened. "I barely got her to calm down. She wouldn't go back to sleep. So if you're going to have a serious conversation, please keep it down." Adriana closed the door tightly and started asking Peter about what was going on between him and Hope. "I overheard part of your conversation by accident," the woman said. "And I don't understand what's going on with you. That's not what Nancy told me." "What was it?" Peter asked. "Unless, of course, it's not a secret." After listening to Adriana, the young man said, "It appears that she has been deceiving both you and me. It's a science to weave such intrigues. Only one thing I wonder. What does she really do? Where is she?" Peter did not expect to meet his wife, who entered the apartment just as he was about to leave. "Yes," she muttered thoughtfully at the wrong time. "I came home today." "Yes, Nancy, you did." Adriana answered sternly. From the look in her mother's eyes, she realized that she knew that her daughter was lying to her, and that meant only one thing. They were going to have a serious and difficult conversation. "Well, I'm going to go anyway," said Peter. "Adriana, thanks for the tea. And you hang up on my calls and don't lie to your mother." Nancy went straight to the kitchen and looked at her mother and said, "Don't give me any moralizing now. I'll explain it all to you myself. I didn't do any divorce all this time, and I didn't meet or call Peter." "Well, I guessed." Sighing, Adriana answered. "Nancy, let's talk seriously. How do you plan to move on with your life?" "I don't, Mom, I don't. I've met the man I plan to spend my life with. He's very rich. After I divorce Peter, we want to get married and go abroad." "What? What foreign country? What are you doing? You're out of your mind. You can do what you want, but I won't let you take the baby away. Peter won't let you either. You can go away on your own." Nancy went silently to her room and for the next week never spoke a word to her mother or sister. The silence was broken by Kelly, who had many grievances against her sister. "Do you want to talk?" she asked her sister when she came home at 0 o'clock. "You are not ashamed that I and the mother take care of your daughter as their own. I don't fall asleep, by the way. As soon as Vanessa wakes up, I feed her, I walk her." While you were out and about, Kelly spoke almost in a whisper so as not to wake Adriana and Vanessa, who were already asleep. Nancy pretended not to hear her sister. Kelly came right up to her and grabbed her arm, dragging Nancy into the kitchen. "You have no shame or conscience, sister," Kelly whispered angrily. "Aren't you ashamed that your mother and I are tearing this place apart? You're lying to Peter. What do you care?" Nancy smirked. "Or what? It's just an old love that's been bugging you." Nancy knew that Kelly had been in love with Peter since high school and had been hurting her sister at every opportunity. Kelly tried not to react to the painful jabs, but sometimes it was so unpleasant that she couldn't contain herself. The conversation ended with nothing to wake up her mother and little Vanessa. Kelly left her sister alone. A month later, Nancy told her mother she was leaving. "I've done the paperwork overseas. We'll go as tourists for now, and then we'll figure out how to stay there permanently. Anthony will decide everything." The girl happily shared her plans with her mother. Adriana listened to her daughter and wondered, what about Vanessa? "You haven't even finalized the divorce yet. What will happen to your daughter?" the woman asked. "I talked to Peter. He will never allow you to take Arakshka to another country." "Well, let him bring her up himself." Nancy dismissed it. "Or has he decided that he's going to continue to run at his job? And you and Kelly to bring up his child? Like a dog in the hay? Not for himself, not for people. He doesn't want a better life for his daughter. He doesn't want to do anything for her either. I'll talk to him myself, get a divorce, and have him sign the authorization. My daughter should live with me. In general, children should live with their mother, not with someone else. Nancy, are you listening to yourself? What are you talking about right now? You want to go to another country with some strange man you've known for a week, and take your little daughter with you. You're out of your mind." After talking to Peter, Nancy decided to back out of her plans. She realized it was useless to try to convince him of anything. It would lead to nothing but scandals, which she didn't want to waste her time on. "We're getting a divorce. And I'm leaving," she said. And that conversation with her husband was the last. They didn't even say hello to each other in court. Peter didn't resist making it official that Vanessa was staying with her mother. He knew that Nancy would not be involved in the upbringing of his daughter anyway. Everything would fall on the shoulders of Adriana, whom he trusted. The mother supported her son Peter. "Did you do the right thing?" said Wendy. "Let her go to all four corners, as long as it's over soon." After Hope's departure, Adriana and Kelly started talking about a very serious topic that they had been afraid to bring up all this time. "What are we going to tell Vanessa when she grows up and asks where her mom is?" The woman asked her daughter. "Maybe we won't tell her about Hope at all, as if it doesn't exist at all." Adriana was very resentful of her daughter, who had done such a mean thing to both her and the child. She had spent her whole life trying to make Nancy happy, and she was always missing something. She wanted too much out of life, what Adriana couldn't give her, and that just made Nancy angry. "No, Mom, you can't do that. It's not possible. Are you out of your mind? What if Nancy comes back? What if she comes to her senses and wants to raise her daughter? You can't lie to a child. And where are you going with this? You know your daughter better than anyone. She'll go out now, come back in a couple months, get a job, and live like everybody else. Her major needs her badly. He'll take her on trips abroad. It's nice. He'll have a good time, and then they'll throw her away like a useless thing. She's not the first, she's not the last. Oh, look who's here, Kelly. I'll never forgive her." Adriana mumbled through her tears. "I won't forgive, and I won't accept it. How could she do this to us? Nancy, she always grew up such a kind, open-minded girl. When did she have time for all this? I didn't teach her that. Nobody taught her that at school either. It's inexplicable. And this crazy craving for luxury and living off everything. It's mind-boggling. Nancy never came home after a few months or a year. At first, she still called her mother and sister, asking how Vanessa was doing. Send money. Then 2 years after she left, it was as if she vanished into thin air. Her cell phone was unavailable. Adriana didn't know where she was. Maybe she had decided to burn all her bridges, Peter suggested when he stopped by to visit his daughter. Maybe she had married that rich man, Anthony, after all. It seems we were all wrong too. He's actually a good man, not a one-night stand. And now she's happy and has forgotten all about us. A normal man would never tie his fate to a woman who abandoned her child, Adriana said harshly, because he realizes that someday she might do the same to their children together, and in general. But do you believe what you're saying? Oh, please. Do you know how many young men are like Nancy these days? And we don't care about children or parents or anyone but ourselves. It's not a question of that, it's a question of what we're going to do next. And if something happened to her, we need to make it clear. If she does not want to communicate with us and has decided to give up her family, then let her do it officially, like a normal person. Come here, write a waiver of parental rights and live in peace. It's kind of a two-way street. She's calling, she's suddenly disappearing, Vanessa's growing up. She doesn't understand anything now. And in a few years, what will we tell her that her mom needs her and then doesn't need her again? Children understand everything, feel everything. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. On the threshold stood a well-groomed, middle-aged woman, who immediately after Adriana clicked the lock tried to throw herself on her neck. "I found you," the stranger exclaimed. "I found you at last. I've lost count. I thought I'd never find you." "Who are you?" asked a surprised Adriana. "And why were you looking for us? And more importantly, who are we?" "You're not confused, are you?" No, the stranger continued. "It's definitely you. I'm sure I really need to talk to you." Adriana made an inviting gesture, and entering the apartment, the stranger finally explained who she was and why she had come. "It's with your daughter. My son went abroad, yes. Her name is Hope." "Is that right?" the woman asked excitedly. "It's a long explanation. Nancy's not our type, but Anthony had so many girls, you can't count them all. You have no idea. I've called them all, I still get new information and immediately sit down to call. Anthony, I have such a secretive boy. He'll never tell his mother anything he doesn't want to. And when disaster strikes, so who's going to help him but his mother? No one. My son is my only son." Adriana didn't realize what was happening. She froze in the middle of the corridor and stood like that for a few minutes, scrutinizing the stranger. "Would you at least introduce yourself?" she asked, coming to her senses and explaining what had happened. "Because you burst into my apartment without a call, without an invitation. It's the first time I've ever seen you talk some real nonsense. And I'm supposed to guess. Yes, I'm sorry. Please excuse the woman. My name is Betty. I'm Anthony's mom. My son, you see, he's missing. And with him, your daughter, she's missing too. I don't know where they are. Nobody knows where they are. I've already contacted everyone I can. The only thing I know is that they went on some kind of tour, but not with a guide, but on their own. And they've been looking for them ever since, and I've been worried sick. I tried for so long to find out who he went with, but none of his friends and acquaintances could tell me anything. Only when Andrew is my Anthony's best friend, we are family friends with his mother. It was only when he came back from abroad, he was studying there, that he told me who Anthony was dating. I went through my channels to find out. And when I finally found you, I came straight here. I wish I knew what happened to our kids right now. You've been looking for us for so long, Adriana asked wryly. Considering the fact that Nancy hasn't contacted us for almost a year, you were obviously very much focused on finding your son. Let's not do this, the woman replied stiffly. I don't live in the country most of the time either. I have my own business and many partners abroad. And Anthony is a grown-up boy. He lives his own life. I give him money for everything he needs. And he's never done anything stupid. I don't know what happened, but I'll do anything to find out. I'd even called my ex-husband. He's been living overseas with a new family for a few years now. I've tapped into both his resources and his ability to find Anthony. They had barely spoken to their son lately, but he agreed to help. Peter and Kelly heard the entire conversation from the first word to the last. When Betty left her phone number and politely said goodbye and left the apartment, the young man turned pale. He couldn't believe what he had just heard in his head. It didn't make sense that Nancy was gone. "Okay, I'll go," he muttered as hard as he could, trying to keep his emotions in check. "I have to go. I'll walk you out." Kelly caught on. "No, that's okay. Thank you. You should stay with Vanessa. And support your mom, too." No matter how much Kelly tried to convince Adriana that Nancy was all right and that her disappearance had nothing to do with the bad thoughts the woman was running through her head, it was all in vain. "You don't understand, daughter," Adriana said. "Our Nancy had the sense to do this, to take and disappear once and for all, vaporized. As if she'd never existed. This young man, on the other hand, had not a single reason to do that to his mother, who does nothing but give him uncontrollable money for expenses, on which he lives carefree and carefree. If he left and hasn't been in touch with her for so long, then something really has happened to him, and our Nancy and too." Kelly hoped that Peter would pay attention to her after this. She tried her best to take care of Vanessa, treating her like her own daughter. When Adriana hinted to her daughter that she should seriously consider getting some education or getting a job, Kelly shrugged it off. "Mom, who's going to take care of Vanessa? She's just a little girl. You can't do it alone. Let me think about it when she's older." After Nancy was declared dead, Kelly agreed to take custody of the girl. "Peter, why don't you come and live with us?" the girl asked casually. "Or shall we come and live with you? In fact, I wanted to make you a suggestion. While Vanessa is still small and doesn't understand anything yet, let's get married. She already sees me as her mom, and when she grows up, we'll tell her I'm her mom, and we won't say anything about Nancy at all. Why traumatize the child?" "No," Kelly replied stiffly to the young man. "I never saw you as a woman, and nothing has changed now. And in general, I have long wanted to tell both you and Adriana that in the light of all these events I have never dared, could not find a convenient moment. I've met the woman I love, and I'm getting married. I'm not giving up my commitment to my daughter. I will continue to help you with money and come to Vanessa. But I will spend most of my time with my family, where I am sure I will soon have children too." At that moment, Kelly finally realized that she had lost the last Nancy, and after thinking for a few days after talking to Peter, she called the young man and said that she forbade him to come to visit them. "And why Vanessa needs a father who has another family and other children?" asked the young woman. When Peter tried to explain to her that Vanessa is his daughter and he has every right to visit her and communicate with her. "You said yourself that you will have a new family. So take care of your family, raise your new kids. Or would you consider taking Vanessa away from us and taking her to live with your new family? That will never happen. Remember that and get it through your head. I wasn't planning on taking anyone away. What the hell are you talking about? Kelly, come to your senses, please. You can't see past your crazy, contrived love for me. I never gave you any hope. I never even hinted to you that we'd ever be together. I've always seen you solely as a good and loyal friend of a person to socialize with, Nancy's little sister. But I never treated you as a woman, and I'll still come to faith. And I will give Adriana money. And you can't stop me from communicating with my daughter. And if you try to, I will sue you." Peter was angry. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to say what he thought without pretending to be an intelligent and well-mannered man. He was tired of thinking about how other people would feel. He wanted very badly to be himself, and he felt he had every right to be. Adriana didn't approve of her daughter's decision. "Olga, I think you're overreacting," she said sternly. "But what does his new family and future children and our Vanessa have to do with it? I don't understand your logic at all. How are these things connected? And you can't deprive a girl of her father. It's enough that she will grow up without a mother, in a sense without a mother." Kelly was outraged. "I'll replace her father and mother. And she'll grow up to be a fine person, no worse than anyone else. I've told you many times that you don't have to tell her about science. She doesn't know it, and she never will. I don't understand your desire to trumpet the truth from every corner. Kelly will tell her about her mother anyway when she's old enough to understand these things. You're learning from her as her guardian. And don't make a girl look stupid. She's going to ask you why she's in foster care and where are her birth parents. And what will you say? The mother ran away abroad and disappeared. I kicked the father out myself. I'll say that the mother was an expeditor or an investigator and left life as a hero, not as a disgrace. It's better than her finding out the truth. Don't you think so? I don't think anything. Peter kept his word, and despite Kelly's prohibition, he regularly visited his daughter, gave her gifts, and gave Adriana money. But the older Vanessa became, the more she gave herself away from her father. As a teenager, the girl began to behave inappropriately towards the man, constantly rude and hung up on him. When Peter called her just to talk, she would not show up for appointments. "Leave her alone, son," said Wendy. "Don't you realize it's Kelly who's turning her against you? Forget about this family. You have a beautiful wife, not like Nancy was kind, smart, hardworking. That's the kind of son you've got growing up. You can see the character that's in his father. I'm glad you've grown up and come to your senses and found a woman who is worthy of you, not just another net with a wind in her head." When Peter made the decision to marry Maria, he was very afraid of how his mom would react to the news, just as she had a few years ago. "I'm very worried," he muttered before the new dinner at which he was to introduce Maria as his bride. "If my mother doesn't like you, she'll drive me crazy and she won't give us a quiet life at all. Not in my apartment, not in a separate apartment." But Wendy's reaction pleasantly surprised Peter. The woman immediately appreciated Maria. "So you are also colleagues," she exclaimed happily. "And we are colleagues too. That's good. There will always be something to talk about at dinner when Liam's son is born." Wendy and Alex were overjoyed. They couldn't stop praising and extolling their daughter-in-law. "What a Maria! Well done. She gave us an heir. Tomorrow I will take care of the process of re-registration of the apartment on the boy," joyfully exclaimed Father Dad. "Isn't it a little early?" asked Peter. "You not only have a grandson, but also have a son. And you are not going to die. Let him grow up to be a man first, to achieve something in life, at least in his studies. I'm not talking about your career, and then sign the apartment over to him." Yeah, the son's right. Peter, Wendy's right. We're not old and we're not going to die. Let the grandchild grow up, and then, look, we'll save up and buy him a separate apartment. For the first time in years, Peter felt a painful prick. When he got married, his parents didn't even think about spending their savings on a separate apartment for him and Nancy. If we had lived separately and had our own place, maybe things would have turned out differently, he thought to himself. Peter wanted Vanessa to be friends with his brother and to treat him as a member of her family. But all his attempts to talk to Kelly about it had failed, and Vanessa's behavior was getting worse and worse every year. "I don't understand, my daughter. Why do you feel this way about Liam?" Peter wondered. "He was just born. You haven't even met him. Is Aunt Kelly setting you up? Tell me, be honest. She says something bad about me and my family. Nobody's tuning me out." The girl answered, "It's just that your son is growing up with you and his mom in a complete family. And I am brought up by my grandmother and aunt. And you only come to visit me on weekends and not every time." Conflicts between Vanessa and Peter were becoming more and more frequent, and Kelly never missed an opportunity to gently add fuel to the fire. When she had the opportunity, and it wasn't too obvious from the outside. At a certain point, Peter realized that there was no point in talking to Vanessa. They were only ruining each other's moods. Much to his dismay, his daughter was not growing up the way he would have liked her to. Nancy was all about her son. Peter was sure he could raise him right, the way he thought he should be raised. Peter kept his word, and despite Kelly's prohibition, he regularly visited his daughter, gave her gifts, and gave Adriana money. But the older Vanessa became, the more she gave herself away from her father. As a teenager, the girl began to behave inappropriately towards the man, constantly rude and hung up on him. When Peter called her just to talk, she would not show up for appointments. "Leave her alone, son," said Wendy. "Don't you realize it's Kelly who's turning her against you? Forget about this family. You have a beautiful wife, Not like Nancy was kind, smart, hardworking. That's the kind of son you've got growing up. You can see the character that's in his father. I'm glad you've grown up and come to your senses and found a woman who is worthy of you, not just another net with a wind in her head. When Peter made the decision to marry Maria, he was very afraid of how his mom would react to the news, just as she had a few years ago. I'm very worried, he muttered before the new dinner at which he was to introduce Maria as his bride. If my mother doesn't like you, she'll drive me crazy and she won't give us a quiet life at all. Not in my apartment, not in a separate apartment. But Wendy's reaction pleasantly surprised Peter. The woman immediately appreciated Maria. So you are also colleagues, she exclaimed happily. And we are colleagues too. That's good. There will always be something to talk about at dinner when Liam's son is born. Wendy and Alex were overjoyed. They couldn't stop praising and extolling their daughter-in-law. What a Maria. Well done. She gave us an heir. Tomorrow I will take care of the process of re-registration of the apartment on the boy, joyfully exclaimed Father Dad. Isn't it a little early? Asked Peter. You not only have a grandson, but also have a son. And you are not going to die. Let him grow up to be a man first, to achieve something in life, at least in his studies. I'm not talking about your career, and then sign the apartment over to him. Yeah, the son's right. Peter, Wendy's right. We're not old and we're not going to die. Let the grandchild grow up, and then, look, we'll save up and buy him a separate apartment. For the first time in years, Peter felt a painful prick. When he got married, his parents didn't even think about spending their savings on a separate apartment for him and Nancy. If we had lived separately and had our own place, maybe things would have turned out differently, he thought to himself. Peter wanted Vanessa to be friends with his brother and to treat him as a member of her family. But all his attempts to talk to Kelly about it had failed, and Vanessa's behavior was getting worse and worse every year. I don't understand, my daughter. Why do you feel this way about Liam? Peter wondered. He was just born. You haven't even met him. Is Aunt Kelly setting you up? Tell me, be honest. She says something bad about me and my family. Nobody's tuning me out. The girl answered. It's just that your son is growing up with you and his mom in a complete family. And I am brought up by my grandmother and aunt. And you only come to visit me on weekends and not every time. Conflicts between Vanessa and Peter were becoming more and more frequent, and Kelly never missed an opportunity to gently add fuel to the fire. When she had the opportunity, and it wasn't too obvious from the outside. At a certain point, Peter realized that there was no point in talking to Vanessa. They were only ruining each other's moods. Much to his dismay, his daughter was not growing up the way he would have liked her to. Nancy was all about her son. Peter was sure he could raise him right, the way he thought he should be raised. Back then, he didn't yet know how much of a mistake he was making by stopping communicating with his daughter and investing all of his time and money in his son. Go through Dad's things, Emily asked as she entered the study. Her return home had taken Vanessa by surprise. The girl didn't even notice how she stood in one place for several hours, looking at the photo she had found, going over her own memories in her head. Vanessa had lost both her connection to reality and her track of time. Emily, I have a question for you, Vanessa said, turning around. It is probably of a personal nature. So I apologize in advance for the time Vanessa worked for Emily. She had learned to socialize like a high society girl, and sometimes even surprised herself. She became polite and tactful. She learned to be patient and restrain her emotions. She took as a rule that it is better to apologize once more than to burst into scandal. Ask away, Emily replied. If I think the question is not too frank, I will answer. Who is it? Vanessa held out a picture to Alina, but the girl immediately pushed her hand away. Don't, said Emily. I can see it. And where did you find it? We decided to clean out my father's most secret stash. Emily was in a lyrical and nostalgic mood that day, and she felt an urgent need to talk to someone about her father and his life. To remember both the warmest and the not-so-warm moments. Everything about the woman belonged to some very difficult memories of the late James, but Emily decided to tell Faith about her, thereby answering the question that had so deeply troubled the girl. This is Molly, my father's wife. What's a wife? Just a name. As soon as he got sick, she went straight back to her foreign country and said she couldn't stand it, poor thing, and she better go away. But before that they lived quite well. She even tried to get me a stepmother, but I treated her only as my father's wife. We were never really close to her. He married her about 3 years after Mom died. I don't remember exactly when they met. Why did you ask about her? I really need to meet her, Vanessa replied, and talk to her. It's a long explanation. If you'll allow me, I won't go into details. But she didn't come to the funeral. She said she had some important business she couldn't put off. Of course, that's all lies. She just didn't have the strength to see him like that. At her level and status, no business could be so urgent that she couldn't find a way to fly to the funeral. She's a woman, not a poor woman, with a chain of beauty salons abroad, her own clothing brand, a businesswoman. For her, a flight from country to country takes no more than a couple hours. Molly flies exclusively by private jet. It was just so wild to hear her excuses about the negotiations. Honestly, I could barely keep from telling her what I thought of her. But for the sake of my father's memory, I'm not gonna fight with her. They're legally married, so she'll probably come for 9 days to settle the inheritance. If Dad didn't leave a will, she'll inherit half of his estate and his fortune. That's a lot of money. She doesn't have much of her own. But she would never let someone else's stuff go, even though they didn't name anything together. She had everything her own, and he also did not even have a common business. He picked her up on some trip. He didn't share any details with me. I was little then, only when I grew up he told me the heartwarming story of their acquaintance. In general, Vanessa, I would like to know why you want to meet her. After hearing Vanessa's story, Emily didn't seem surprised at all. All the time the girl was sharing with her the details of her hard fate, she only nodded her head. And when Vanessa finished telling Elena about Hope, she looked directly into her eyes and said honestly, I always felt that she was a person with rottenness. But that's just the way she is. What can you do? What did her father see in her? I never understood. My mom was a completely different person, kind, sincere, caring. She could never abandon her own child. She wouldn't have been capable of such a despicable act. Apparently, after she was gone, the father went crazy. I don't know, I never liked her. It's just that now I'm wondering how she became someone she never was. Why is she called by a different name? And is it even her? Maybe she has a twin sister. That's out of the question. My mother only has one sister, Kelly, who raised me after my mom was gone. She has no other sisters. Is it possible that your grandmother hid something from you and her daughters, like leaving one child in an orphanage, or something like that? Yeah, but no, that's impossible. My grandmother is not that kind of person. She would never abandon her own daughter. It's not possible in the hospital. But since Emily said so thoughtfully, I'll have to take you with me for 9 days. I'm more than sure Molly won't have any urgent business. She has to find out who her father left everything to. But I'd talk to your grandmother and aunt if I were you. They're obviously hiding something from you. You can see that. Mom was an expeditor. Emily grinned. You'd have to think of something like that. And so many years of nonsense to her granddaughter and niece. I wonder why they needed it. What weren't you supposed to know? Vanessa wouldn't mind answering at least one of these questions herself. But without her mother, she wouldn't have been able to know everything that happened 18 years ago. Vanessa had never looked forward to anything in her life as much as this meeting. When on the eve of Emily's 9 days in front of her, Molly had called her and confirmed that she would be coming. The girl couldn't place herself. She could not explain even to herself how she felt at that moment. Go and go to bed, Emily said. Stop sewing and pacing the room from side to side. You're already making my eyes water. You'll be up all day tomorrow, and you won't be able to have any meaningful conversation. Vanessa realized that Emily was right, but she couldn't help it. The excitement had taken over her completely, and she was in over her head. She had only been able to sleep for 3 o'clock, and when she popped out at dawn, she thought about what she would say to her. What if her mother didn't remember her at all? After all, it had been so many years, and she wasn't her anymore. How many questions arose in her mind, and how she would like to know the answers to them. Vanessa had never been more anxious in her life than she was on this day. It wasn't until Molly walked into the living room where many people had already gathered. Vanessa realized that all the emotions she had felt until that moment were nothing. When the girl saw her mother, her heart shook. That's for sure. She thought to herself, Vanessa, even after all these years, I would never mistake her for anyone else. I think you and I will divide the inheritance fairly, Molly said, taking Alina aside. I have enough of my own property, so I have no claim on your father's money. And yes, if you think that I did a mean thing by leaving at the most difficult moment of his life, and I know that you think so, then it is not true. I can't have negative emotions. Stress can be very detrimental to my health, and I have every right to shield myself from it. You don't know anything about me at all. These words came as a complete surprise to Emily. She was sure that Molly would claim half of her father's property. I have a favor to ask you, Emily replied. There is a girl who wants to talk to you. It is very important. What did the woman ask in surprise, and who is this girl I need to talk to so badly? Her name is Vanessa. She works in my house. She'll explain everything to you. But let's not do it now. Let's do it after the wake is over. Hold on. Yes, of course, I have to fly out tomorrow morning. I can talk to your girlfriend tonight. When the wake was over, there were only 3 people left at Emily's house. This is the Vanessa you need to talk to. Emily introduced the girl and then left the living room and closed the door behind her. Vanessa looked at Elvira Anatolievna and was amazed at how similar they looked. The woman noticed the obvious resemblance too, but didn't say a word until Vanessa spoke to her herself. I have something very important to tell you, she murmured. Please listen to the end of the story. While Vanessa was telling her life story, Molly remembered the words of the doctor who had pulled her from the dead. You may never again remember what happened to you before all of this. You must realize that it is the truest miracle that you survived and were found. But your memory is lost forever. There is little chance that the whole picture of your past life will be restored in your head. It can happen suddenly. In my practice, there have been such cases, but they are isolated. In most cases, patients with such traumas started their lives with a clean slate. She didn't pay much attention to those words at the time. She did not remember what had happened to her and how she had ended up in the hospital. Nor did she remember the terrible days she spent in the intensive care unit between life and death. That day, she and Anthony went on an excursion to the mountains, but at a certain point realized that they had fallen behind the group. The guide was found on the internet. He didn't ask anyone for the ones he took with him. Nowhere registered amateur. Very much wanted adventure and new sensations. And everything turned out not at all as they had planned. Until the evening, they tried to find their way to the city, but they could not. It was almost unreal in a foreign country in unfamiliar territory. They could not even imagine that they would be hit by a rockfall. Anthony exclaimed she looked, "Let's get out of here." But they didn't make it. That terrible moment was also erased from her memory. She woke up in the hospital. And when she found out that she had spent a month in intensive care, she was shocked. She had no papers or belongings on her. She couldn't remember her name from anywhere. She didn't come to the hospital or her family. Everything was useless. She heard the words of the volunteer she lived with after she was discharged from the hospital. It's been 6 months and no one has recognized her. We sent out an alert to all the foundations and organizations working in dozens of countries where she could have come from. But we haven't gotten a single response. It is necessary to make her documents and to give her a chance to start a new life. She will not sit here for several years and do nothing. No, of course she can stay here as long as it takes. But she's healthy, and her memory may never come back. We should do some memory work, get some sponsors to help. Let her make a name for herself. That's how she'll be registered. A lot of people who've lost their memory do that, and it's no big deal. She's tired of it all herself. Every day from morning till night, she tried to remember anything from her past life, but it was all in vain. She fell asleep and woke up with a sore head. And more than anything else in the world at that moment, she wanted to do something to take her mind off the reality she found herself in. Gradually, life got back on track. She was able to get a job, pay for a place to live, make plans. Turns out I can adjust to circumstances. From everything to capitalize, even from those situations in which others see no prospects at all. That's what helped me to quickly solve all the problems I had to face. It took me very little time to put several beauty salons on the rails. Of course, I didn't achieve all this without help, but I don't want to go into details. It's all in the past. I survived as best I could back then. And to this day, I am grateful to all those people who gave me a helping hand in that difficult period. Even those who did not do it for free. I will not hide, if it were not for my late husband, it is unlikely that I would have been able to arrange my life so easily in a foreign country. After everything that's happened to me, fate sent him to me. He was a sponsor of the charity where I was taken in after the hospital. He helped me with the paperwork. His money played a crucial role in my fate. I will always remember him and thank him for everything he did for me. A year later, when I was widowed, I met James. I met him when he came to negotiate with his partners. We met at an event. At that time, I was already, so to speak, a man of the highest circle. From that moment, a new stage of my life began. And then Emily must have told you everything. No, Emily didn't tell me anything, Vanessa answered. She's not my friend, she's my employer. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happened to you. The most important thing is that I found you after all these years. Just by chance, but I found it. Don't you remember anything at all? You had a family, didn't you? I still do. My mom, my sister, me. If only it were that simple, sighed the woman. I don't even remember that. I don't remember anything about anything that happened to me. I know from hearsay. And now you've told me, but I don't know if it's true or not. And Emily? She thinks I didn't love her father. But that's not true. I loved him very much, and I always treated her like my own daughter. Only she didn't realize it or didn't want to see it. I felt sorry for James' wife, too. He always talked about her with such fondness. Emily was a late baby, and they wanted a daughter or a son. But it just never worked out. And then she started having health problems. Doctors warned her she shouldn't think about having kids, no matter how much she wanted to. It was her age, but she wouldn't listen to anyone. She said she was going to have a baby. I guess you can't say that. I shouldn't have said that. Come on, it's no big deal. Do you want to come home with me? I'm sure Mom would love to see you, but I know you have to fly. You have your life, we have ours. But of course I do, Vanessa. I've dreamed all this time of finding my family, of finding out who I am and where I come from. But I realized that it's almost unrealistic. If no one had found me for so long, they wouldn't have found me. Mommy, the main thing is that I found you, that you're alive, Vanessa murmured, hugging the woman. I always wished I had a mom. Seeing Nancy on the doorstep, Adriana was shocked. She could barely stay on her feet. Vanessa, who's that? Kelly yelled at the girl. Who did you bring into our house? You see what Kelly's done to Grandma. It's your sister. Nancy, Vanessa answered. Only now she goes by a different name. But that's her. You see, you can't mistake her for anyone else. At that moment, Kelly felt a painful prick of anger. She looked at the well-dressed woman with reproach and envy. She had recognized her as soon as she and Vanessa had stepped into the apartment, but she didn't want to believe it was possible. You're dead, the sister exclaimed. Somewhere out there, lost in the Bermuda Triangle or in some mountains. Your mother was doing some kind of investigation of her own. Couldn't get anywhere. We'd already buried you, and you just turned up alive. That's how it works. Kelly, stop it right now, I whispered to my aunt. Vanessa, what are you talking about? How can you do this? She's been through so much. She's lost her memory. She doesn't remember you. Well, we don't remember her either. Kelly screamed. She doesn't remember us. We don't remember her. So what are we talking about? Why bring up the past? Coming to her senses, Adriana looked carefully at the woman who, along with Vanessa, was sitting next to her on the couch. She couldn't believe her eyes. Oh, I think I fainted, muttered the woman. I'm not feeling well at all. Nerves have become to hell. I'm also seeing all sorts of grandmother. It's not hallucinations, it's Mom. Vanessa exclaimed. But take her hand, she's alive. What Mom? Who's Mom? But my mom's my daughter, Grandma. Come to your senses. I realize the situation we're all in is completely stupid. But that doesn't matter right now. The important thing is that your daughter is alive. Do you hear me? She's alive, and here she sits across from you, Nancy." The woman whispered softly and held out her hand to her. "Is it really you? How did this happen?" I cried my eyes out. "I don't know if it's me or not. I honestly don't know. But Vanessa says it's definitely me," the woman whispered through her tears, and took her mother's hand. Kelly didn't even go into the kitchen to have a cup of tea with her sister. She shut herself in her room and sobbed, sitting by the window. She immediately realized that now the sister is not a poor person and married to a tycoon, and she was just as she had dreamed. She thought wryly to herself. She was not interested in listening to her sister's story. She was thinking about her own life, which she devoted to raising someone else's child and love for a man who never reciprocated. And when Vanessa grew up and began to build her own life, her mother's health no longer allowed Kelly to start building her own destiny. Every day, Adriana felt worse. "Kelly, you do not leave me alone in my old age," said the woman. "Live with me until I do not leave this world, and then..." Then she thought angrily to herself, "Kelly, maybe you will live for another 20 years, and no one needs me anymore." Older women without husbands. Career kids all their lives, all fired up, nothing to put off later because that later will never come. "Oh, I should call," Adriana realized. She had kept in touch with the woman all these years, just as she had, hoping that someday a call would ring and she would be told that her daughter was alive and would be coming home soon. No matter how many years passed, Adriana, like any mother, continued to believe that Nancy was alive. They often talked about their children, discussing their lives and such different fates that at some point became intertwined. "How did you find her?" Betty exclaimed happily when she heard Adriana's voice on the phone. "It's been so many years. How lucky is that? Are you sure it's her? It's hard to recognize someone when you haven't seen them for so long, isn't it? It's like a lifetime ago." But when the woman heard the truth, she could hardly hold back her tears. For the first time in years, she seriously realized that Anthony was not alive. She believed, hoped, and gave herself her word that until the body was found, and she was convinced that her boy was gone. Surely she would keep believing. After Adriana's call, the woman realized that there was nothing more to believe in. After politely saying goodbye and thanking Adriana, she hung up the phone and sobbed. "Vanessa, you don't mind if we do an examination, do you?" Molly asked. "I wouldn't want you to be offended. It's just a formality. I need to make sure I'm your mother so that you won't have any problems with your inheritance." "Of course I don't mind," the girl replied. "I have no doubts. But I would also very much like to know for sure." The results came back 2 weeks later. Everything was confirmed. "So you really are my daughter," the woman muttered. "That's great. I don't know you at all. We'll have to get to know you somehow, won't we? You, if you want to move abroad. Tell me, can I get you a job while you're studying?" "Yes, to be honest, I haven't decided what I want to be yet," Vanessa answered thoughtfully. "In general, I am interested in design. It seems to me that it is mine. I'd even draw sketches sometimes. So what's the problem?" "To apply to the institute. Go and study. Then I'll get you a job." "Mom, I think I want to stay here. I won't go abroad. It's not my thing. And I don't know the language. What do you want to do? It's up to you." A few days later, Molly told Vera that she had set up a monthly allowance for all her expenses. "If you need any more money, don't be shy. Speak up. I'll transfer it to you," the woman said. By the way, what else did she want to say? "No matter how much my mom wants me to, I will not change my name. What they made, then the documents are as they are. Let them be. I'm gonna freak out. If I have to reorganize all my real estate, legal entities, and assets. My mom can call me Nancy if that's what she likes." The day after Molly arrived home, she went to a doctor's appointment. But the answer to her questions was the same as it had been for years. "I'm very glad you found your daughter," the doctor said. "But understand, I repeat, this is just another time. You had a very serious head injury. It's a miracle you survived. If that random local resident in those parts, as crazy extreme sports enthusiast, would not have gone there the next day for a walk, you would never have been found. I've told you repeatedly that your memory will probably never come back to you. She never remembered anything, and she didn't even try. It didn't matter to her. What was, and was long gone. And to go back to the past, the woman saw no point. After Molly left, Adriana asked Vanessa if she should tell Peter about Nancy's sudden discovery. Would he find out sooner or later anyway? The girl answered, "But I wouldn't call him. Let him raise his great evil, addicted son. Don't you feel sorry for your brother at all?" Adriana, for a long time, was not surprised by this. She just wanted to know if Vanessa's attitude toward her father and Liam had changed. "No, Grandma, I don't feel sorry for him. Everyone chooses his own path. He had everything he needed to live a normal life. But instead, he chose a crooked path. He's not even out of high school yet, and he's already using so much he's got a record. It's not a life, it's an abyss. And his father idolized him his whole life. You think I don't know all that? My father stopped communicating with me not so much because of my transition age and character, but because of his new family. Why would I want a dad like that? Why would he want me to tell him that Mom's alive?" "That's true," Adriana said with a sigh. A year later, Vanessa enrolled in a design program. She regularly flew to visit her mother abroad, and the woman came to visit her daughter. Molly and Emily's relationship had matured. They would often get together to visit at James' cemetery and remember him with a kind word. When Peter learned that his ex-wife was alive, he tried to establish a relationship with her. Wendy hoped that it would be possible to help Liam in foreign clinics. By then, they had completely lost Nancy. Liam was expelled from school and put on a more serious registry. Every day he was going downhill, and Peter could do nothing about it. Molly didn't even remember him. But what could she do? She helped. From a foreign doctor, he heard all the same things that he was told many times and in domestic clinics. The patient's desire is very important, even if he is on very heavy substances, like your son. Not without it. But when he really wants to get rid of it, it may be too late. Peter understood that and was very sorry that he had stopped communicating with his daughter a few years ago. But Vanessa found the strength to forgive her father. She decided that she wanted to communicate with both parents, whom she had missed so much during her childhood and adolescence.